Thanks for joining us for the Long Island Sound Podcast. Each week we explore new music and dive deeper with the artists and their stories behind the music. Please subscribe and rate and review us wherever you stream this podcast. Here's your host, Steve Yusko.
You are in for a real treat in this episode. I get to speak to Bill Herman. He's the owner of Paradiddle Records, a famous record studio here right on Long Island in Huntington. And we explore this wonderful album called Hank Williams Uncovered. You're going to learn a lot about the music business, about how things have changed, and get Bill's insights. Hey, let's listen to a former guest, Pete Mancini, as he covers Love Sick Blues.
I got a feeling called the blues, oh Lord, since my baby said goodbye. And I don't know what I'll do. All I do is sit and sigh, oh Lord, that last long day she said goodbye. Well, Lord, I thought I would cry. She'll do me, she'll do you, she's got that kind of loving. Lord, I love to hear her when she calls me sweet daddy. Such a beautiful dream. I'd hate to think it all over. I lost my heart, it seems. I've grown so used to you somehow. Well, I'm nobody's sugar daddy now, and I'm lonesome. I got the lovesick blues. I'm in love with the beautiful gal. That's what's the matter with me. I'm in love with the beautiful gal, but she don't care about me. Lord, I tried and I tried to keep her satisfied, but she just wouldn't stay. So now that she is leaving, this is all I can say. I got a feeling called the blues, oh Lord, since my baby said goodbye. And I don't know what I'll do. All I do is sit and sigh, oh Lord, that last long day she said goodbye. Well, Lord, I thought I would cry. She'll do me, she'll do you, she's got that kind of loving. Lord, I love to hear her when she calls me sweet daddy. Such a beautiful dream. I'd hate to think it all over. I lost my heart, it seems. I've grown so used to you somehow. Well, I'm nobody's sugar daddy now, and I'm lonesome. I got the lovesick blues.
Sure. Hey, I'm really excited about the opportunity I have to speak with Bill Herman from Paradiddle Records. And what's so interesting to me is I speak to a lot of singer-songwriters in the industry, and I'm really fascinated to get Bill's experience and perspective on the music industry and the recording and how things have changed in the 17 years or so since Paradiddle Records was started. And we're really going to get into this album, this compilation album that's going to be released in May called Hank Williams Uncovered, just one of many. So we want to really kind of dive into that. And I want to welcome Bill Herman to the Long Island Sound Podcast. Welcome, Bill. Good to have you.
Oh, thanks. It's great to be here. I really appreciate you having me on.
You know what? I think we have the same mission because I was reading, how you approach the business, and you really spotlight what I call the wellspring of talent that we have here on Long Island and the many artists. And I tell you, just a year into this, I am blown away. I'm blown away about how much talent and diversity there are with musicians here on Long Island. So we're on the same path.
That's true. There's so many great musicians on Long Island, and it's great to be able to help getting them some exposure.
I got to ask you this, and it was funny because a friend of mine who's a percussionist says, "You know what paradiddle is?" And I said, I have no idea. Apparently, it's a drum sequence, right? So,
Right. Well, I'm a drummer. I've been playing drums since the fourth grade, but
wow,
I was thinking of a name for the record label, and I wanted something that would catch people's attention. And I was thinking, oh, percussion, flam, and I came across paradiddle. I said, you know what, that flows off your tongue, and people will remember it. They can't spell it; nobody can ever spell it, but they
right.
but they can remember it. So that was the important thing.
As long as they remember it and they're talking about it, that's the key
That
thing, I
that's
guess, right?
right. And you could spell it wrong, and it won't autocorrect either. So
So how did you go from being a drummer at the age of 4? God bless you. You know, I'm
not
sure
the
you
age
had
of
the
fourth grade. Let's.
fourth grade. Okay. How did you move from that to becoming a record producer? I mean, what was that? What was that drive
Well,
that made you say, "Hey, I think I can do this"?
uh, well, I'm one of those. I'm from the generation that saw the Beatles on TV back in 19 was it 63, 64 on the Ed Sullivan Show,
Hmm.
and it basically set my direction on what I wanted to do in my life. I picked up the drums, in the fourth grade. They're like, you got to choose an instrument. My neighbor was a drummer. All right, I'll be a drummer. But I was always fascinated with how records were made. That was one of the things that I was always curious about. I'd lay at night in bed listening to WABC radio, listening to Cousin Brucey playing all the pop hits, which I
Sure.
loved and I still love today. But I always wondered, how did they make those things? And after college, I bought a couple reel-to-reel tape recorders and would record my songs, bounce two tracks, then bounce it to the other, and eventually got one of those digital PlayStations where you could record 8 tracks at one time. And I just love the art of making records. And when I was in my 40s, I decided to really learn how to do it, and I went to an audio recording school.
Okay.
And from there, I started Paradiddle Records along with my partner is Tom Crawford, who at the time had just sold a pizzeria. That was his business.
Hmm.
And we decided, all right, well, we both loved Bob Dylan and decided let's start a record company. Let's make a record of Bob Dylan songs with Long Island artists. And that's how the whole thing started. It's interesting. I mean, we got into this at the exactly wrong time. We got into it when CDs were becoming a thing of the past. Um, and now the only way bands really make money is through performing and touring. You
Right.
look at the price of concert tickets and they're astronomical, but that's because that's the way it's the only way they can make money. They can't really sell records. Nobody buys CDs so much anymore. So the industry has really changed a lot. As a Long Island studio, we're set to make tens of dollars every day, and it's just not it's changed dramatically. Everyone can make music. I mean, the internet's great because everybody can get their music out there, but on the downside, everybody can get their music out there. So there's so many people screaming for your attention. And the challenge is, how do you break through? How do you stand out from all that noise? And that's the real challenge for musicians today.
Right. Where it used to be just an audio, if I capture the audio, I'm really focused in that. I'm talking about the radio and how we got exposed to music. How I'm 61, I stole my sister's albums to,
Right.
play it till the needle wore out type of thing. But now it's different. Now there's a lot of more components to it. You have to be a marketer. You have to throw out reels on TikTok and YouTube and what have you to, become the shiny lure or penny to say, hey, come listen to me, come listen to the whole thing. So it's really interesting, how
Well, there's
it's
so many
it's
outlets for
changed.
the music now. There's, Spotify, Pandora, like you said, YouTube, and I mean, how do you get heard? It's really difficult. It's really
Because
difficult.
right,
Everyone can make a record, like you said, on their phone,
right.
but do they all have the knowledge and the experience like you said, put the nuance in there? How do we make this sound different? What instruments can we add? Being a producer is a really important role in making a record. And if you have a good producer, that can be all the difference in the world. And some people are great at producing themselves and others aren't. So to get the input from a producer and an engineer who knows how to make it sound good is really important. So it's how people perceive what you're putting out there. Everyone sees it in a different way. Everyone comes at it from a different angle. Everyone has a different emotional experience when they hear it and a different background. So
When an artist comes to you and says, "Hey, I have some songs. I want you to record me. I've heard good things about you and want your influence." What happens when, this is maybe strange, when you realize they just don't got the mojo that they need to be a good art? You know what I mean? And I won't talk about who it was, but I had an artist. I have people come to me and say, "Oh, hey, I'd love to be on your podcast." And a lot of it's preference stuff. I don't really discount any genre or anything out of the bat, but sometimes I look at something that they produce and this is real critical. This is bad to say. It looks more like an ego project than something that is cherished by others. Is that fair?
sure, sure, and that's there's a lot of that, not only in music, but in book publishing now. Everybody can publish a book, so
Right.
everybody thinks whatever they're doing is really good. But if somebody comes in and they have music and they want me to record it, I'll do it and I'll encourage them. A lot of people come in and want to record something and say, "Oh, would you put this out on Paradiddle Records?" I always have to walk the line where it's like, well, it's not really right for our label or something like that. That can be a challenge. But I never want to discourage anybody from making music, whether it's good or bad, because I just think the process, just making art is
That's
so
true.
important. And I'm at the point in my life now where I'll only take on the projects I really like.
That's cool.
I mean, a few years ago, I would have, just opened the studio. You want to come in, you want me to work with you, I'll work with you. And now I'm a lot more selective with what I want to do.
I want to talk about Pete Mancini. Pete Mancini, by the way, for those who are listening, look up the Pete Mancini episode. I had such a great experience interviewing Pete Mancini. And then I got a chance, and a lot of my guests like you, Bill, I don't get to see until after the virtual aspect of it. And I got to see Pete at the WUSB 45th anniversary concert. And it was just kind of spectacular. It's just so, and he's the first cut he's the first cut that we heard coming into the episode. So maybe you can talk about Pete and about that cut and how the project came together.
Sure. Well, Pete and I have worked together a long time. He was originally with the band Butcher's Blind. That was the first time somebody sent me, he sent me a 3-song sample CD of songs that he's like, we want to work on these, or we want to record these. And he had also worked with Mike Nugent, and they had just finished Play for the Films. And I was like, wow, this music really strikes me. So we picked up Play for the Films. We put that out. We also did, Destination Blues, a couple other records. I've worked on some of his solo records. So he and I have worked together a long time. And but his music just really connects with me. It's not often an artist does that. And
Sure.
there's a big generation gap between us, but we both love the same music. So it's really interesting to find somebody like that. And so we were working on something. It might have been Bob Dylan Uncovered 3. I don't even know what we were working on. And we had wrapped it up, and I said to Pete, I'm thinking of doing something for Hank Williams. I go, any Hank Williams songs? He goes, yeah, I know one. And he played Lovesick Blues, and I was like, oh my God. I said, that is an amazing track. It's a perfect rendition of a Hank Williams song, and he actually inspired me to move forward with the record after he recorded the basic track, and then we added other things to it. But his version was so good that he inspired me to just keep going with the record.
Yeah, I tell you, I like to express the feelings I have, and I was very, anytime I have a guest like you on, I I devour the music for a couple of days like I was a kid playing, the vinyl album. But what struck me about this 2 CD compilation was one, the diversity in it, okay? But the fact for me was, holy cow, I didn't realize how many Hank Williams songs I actually know that
Yeah.
are in the American lexicon, right? And this may sound that made Hank Williams come alive for me. And then hearing, Pete's a younger man, hearing his voice and his little yodel. I can't even.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, he knocks it
it's
out of the
just
park with that.
whatever.
Yeah.
And he did it this past Sunday. And I'm like, man, this is so cool. This is really cool to keep the spirit alive. And that's what's great about music. It's a moment in time, but it kind of resurrected Hank Williams for me just listening to this compilation.
Well, that's why I love Hank Williams. I mean, Move It On Over by George Thorogood. When I was in
Right.
college, I heard that song. I loved the song, and I realized, oh wait, that's Hank Williams. I didn't realize. I mean, I knew it was, but I didn't recognize it at first as a Hank Williams song. I mean, I first listened to Hank Williams when I was a kid. My father had one of those record players that would stack 6 records high,
Sure,
and they'd
yeah.
drop down.
They'd slap down, yeah.
Right. And one of them was Hank Williams' Greatest Hits. And it would come on, and I listened to it. But then I realized years later how much that music really resonated with me. I mean, like you said, so many of his songs are there that you don't know are his songs.
Right.
You look at Grateful Dead, Europe 62. They do You Win Again, which Gene Casey did on this CD. At that time, I never realized it was Hank Williams until years later, and I really looked into it. He's all over the place.
Right. And especially when you go the span of a generation, right? Where it kind of drifts away, in your memory because it was on record, right? You don't realize it was a cover. Same thing happens with, the Grateful Dead and Buddy Holly and stuff like that.
Sure.
Certain
sure.
thing you go, oh yeah, that's Buddy Holly. And it was a 2.5 minute song, not a
Right.
45 minute guitar solo.
Right.
No disparage
Exactly.
Deadheads, I apologize right off the bat for that. But now, in putting together the compilation, so I know there's legal aspect of it, but I guess all these songs are not copyrighted, and you can do covers. There's no legalisms with that. I mean, what's the background on, or is there any difficulty in putting together a compilation?
Well, most of his songs are published by Ascoff Rose, I think is how you say it. But really, all you have to do is pay the mechanical rights. I mean, you have to pay rights for the physical CDs that you're manufacturing. Anything streaming is covered by the streaming companies. So
I follow you. Okay.
So we pay the mechanical rights for the CDs that we run. We always do that. And it's easy enough to do. When we did the Bob Dylan stuff, that was different. Now it's easy because he doesn't really own his music anymore. But in the early days, the first thing we did was called Bob Dylan Uncovered, and he had like 3 or 4 different publishing companies that he that owned his music, and we had to contact each one, sign a contract, pay them. That was a lot more difficult. Now his music is owned by whoever bought it. I forget who bought up all his music, but now you can go online and there's a couple different sites you can go and you pay the mechanical rights and you can do it.
Hey, let's do this. Let's just take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk about why there are still CDs, in particular for a studio. So, hey everybody, we got so much to discover with Bill Herman. We'll be right back after this brief message. Hang with us.
At the Long Island Sound, we're much more than a podcast. We're building a community. Please go to gigdestiny.com, check out all our social media links, subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast. Please comment, call the listener line, tell us what you think, what questions we should ask, who we should have on the show. And most of all, we thank you for your generous support. And remember, support the artists who are guests on the show. Now back to the podcast.
Hey, everybody. We're back with Bill Herman. This is Steve Yusko, your not so humble host of the Long Island Sound podcast. And Bill, it's really great to have you and get a perspective from a studio pro like yourself. So the strange thing is, one, I actually have a CD player because my car's so old, so I get to do my homework. But cars don't come with CD players. So if that's the case, why do you make CDs?
Um, I will say there are three reasons.
Okay.
One, there are a lot of the music I make is geared towards a more mature audience, shall we say. So they still buy CDs.
Cool.
You know, they might stream, but they're not as comfortable with it, and they like CDs. They like holding
Physicality of it.
something in their hand. Yeah, I mean, and now a lot of them are going back to the vinyl. I mean, I still love my vinyl, and I still buy new vinyl, but CDs are still important for them. Radio stations, you know, again, a lot of them want to have a CD. They want to play it, and then an artist when he's out performing, depending on the crowd, again, they want to walk away with something, they can walk away with a CD. I used to manufacture, you know, 1,000 CDs for an album I'd put out. Now it's not nearly as many, shall we say.
Yeah, sure. And especially when you get into the fact that young artists depend on merch, which is kind of an interesting aspect. You know, the T-shirt, the cozy or whatever, you know, whatever they can do to support themselves. I guess this is just another vehicle, you know, for that. Hey, I want to talk about the changes that I've seen in that artists used to do full albums. And now it seems to be a trend towards EPs, whether 3 or 5 songs. And have you seen that as well with how people go out and engage their audience?
Yeah, I've seen that. That's a big trend because you know, you get 5 songs, you can put 5 songs together faster, although, you know, instead of waiting till you have 10 for an album. Personally, I'd rather hear an album if it's, I mean, an album used to be a body of work where you would take you know, you'd have side one, side two, and it all flowed together.
Right.
But the way people listen to music has changed so much. People have playlists. People, you know, will shuffle playlists. So the album is not as important to a lot of people as it used to be. And an EP is like a side of an album, so it's still a good thing, but it's a good way for an artist to continue to get their music out there before they have a whole album done.
Yeah. So there, during the time when albums were the major thing, a lot of thought went into, okay, what's going to be that first song on side one? How am I going to approach this? How's this going to lead into the next song and the next song? Is it going to tell a story or have a flow?
Sure.
I think it was Frank Zappa who said, you know, his catalog was one long show, basically, or one continuous song is how he looked at what he created, you know, to put out there. So that's gone. It's unfortunate.
But you know, you say that, but we put out the Hank Williams CD, and trying to put that in order is a big challenge.
Yeah,
And that's I probably could have fit all those songs on one CD, but I wanted to make it 2 CDs so I could come up with a flow, something that made sense musically, listening one song into the next,
Right.
Because I still think that's important. You know, to me it is, at least.
Yeah. So not only are you orchestrating or putting the how the song is played and instruments and that sort of thing, and now this is another layer of how you approach the music. Let me ask you this: how did you get all these people to how do you do? I mean, it looked like you put together a football team. There's so many different artists on this. It's just,
Yeah, we have.
it seems overwhelming to me.
We have 22 artists. I think a total of 66 musicians.
Wow.
I would say I think every one of them I've worked with before. You know, when I started this, like I said, Pete I was thinking of doing it. He inspired me to keep going. You know, I immediately reach out to like Gene Casey, Caroline Doctorow, Mary Lamont, people that I know are right for the project. Mike Meehan of the Lucky Ones. These are just people I know and I've worked with. And then you start doing this, and I'll be recording something in my studio and post it on Facebook, and somebody says, "Oh, wow, that sounds like a great project. Can I be part of it?" So what you think is going to be a single album all of a sudden turns into a double album because you get these people who want to be on it that you know are good, and you say, well, how can I not let them on there? And it just keeps growing and growing.
Yeah, I almost equate it to one of my favorite shows to watch even till this day is the 30th anniversary concert of Bob Dylan. You know,
Oh yeah,
and,
it's
and how
wonderful.
they divided up the songs to play. You know, who played what and their inspiration and their voice to the song, their interpretation. I always find so fascinating, and Dylan is just so different that he plays in his concerts. He used to, you know, I remember listening to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. They're like, yeah, he would start a song at a different tempo and a different key and not tell anybody to keep
Yeah.
everybody on freaking edge to to, to be in that moment, which is I can't imagine. You know, it's
Go
it's
ahead.
interesting. I've heard rumors that some of the artists are a little wacky from
Yeah, yeah.
my
He
just
probably is the head whack. But
a little bit. Him and my other favorite is Neil Young, who is totally
yeah.
wacky. He's,
Well,
you know,
but I think that's part of where their genius comes from. You know, they're thinking they don't think like everybody else,
yeah,
and that's why they can create the things that they create.
right. So when you put this album together, how long did it take you from inspiration from Pete to the final pressing?
14, 15 months.
Wow, that's a pretty aggressive schedule, really, when I think about it.
It actually
I
was
thought,
longer than I thought because
oh,
you
really?
know I
Yeah.
start but again because it turned into a double CD. It usually takes a year to make a record for me
Okay.
at least. And this one took, you know, as I said, 14, 15 months. And at the end, I was, you know, almost ready to go. And then, wow, there's another track I got to add. And, oh, wait, then there's another track I got to add. And so, you know, it takes a while, but it was a fun process.
So I have another technical question as far as production rights, you
Hmm.
know, because as I was looking through each song, you know, certain people get a production credit. How do you agree on that? Is that a proper question? Like,
How do you,
in other
um,
words, do you take a song and say, you know, he was really produced this song, or I'm the overall producer, or am I getting to minutia that really doesn't mean anything?
no, I mean, I think it's important, you know, like, you know, a producer of a song is like a director of a movie. And
Okay,
I always want to make sure everybody who's involved gets the credit that they're due. You know, a lot of the songs were recorded here in my studio, but a lot of them were recorded by other people in their studios. And if it's recorded by, you know, I mean, that's just, they just tell me who their credits are if they recorded it someplace else, if it's recorded here. You know, we
gotcha.
just got to make sure you give everybody their due. And that's really important. Whether it
Right,
be they're playing tambourine or whether they're, you know, sliding a fader on a mixing board, everybody should get their due.
nice. That's a good point. I tell you, I got something on my wish list. I would love to see this as a show. You know, as
Yeah.
something at old, you know, at Westbury, you know, where you have X number of artists come up. I think that would draw people in. I really do.
I'd love to also. I don't know. I've thought about it. If I could come up with a way to do it that makes sense, I would love to put this together as a show.
Okay, so
You
we're
got
gonna do.
any ideas? You let me
Uh,
know.
this is the forum. Any of you money men out there, listen to this CD when it comes out in May. You're gonna have the same as ideas I had. I have no money, and you're gonna say, you know what, this would be a good show. You know, because what I like about your concept, and you've done, by the way, like, may I? I think I will. Bob Dylan Uncovered. Bob Dylan Uncovered 2. Willie Nile. The King. By the way, I devoured. Do I got that right?
The Kinks, yeah.
Sorry. I devoured the Kinks when I was in high school. The Kinks and the Doors were like everything I listened to. What else do we got? Bob Dylan Uncovered 3. I think you like Bob Dylan. I think you said that earlier.
I don't know. I don't know where you got that idea.
I don't know. It just comes to me. I can kind of
Yeah.
piece the puzzle together. It's just
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a gift. You know, it's a skill. Hey,
But
let's. I'm sorry. Did
go
you-
ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I should probably let the guest talk. I guess it's probably a good idea. Hey,
No, finish your thought. Finish your thought.
tell us about the next song we're going to hear. I'm a long gone daddy, and the uniqueness of it, and the person or the band behind it.
So I'm a long gone daddy. I think that was one of Hank Williams' hits. So it's recorded by they're credited as the Lucky Ones, but Mike Meehan is the driving musical force behind it. Mike Lucci is the production force behind it, and he also played a lot of the instruments on it. So Mike Meehan played in a band that for a while featured Levon Helm.
Wow.
So he has some real street cred. He's also one of Long Island's top chefs. So Mike has a lot of skills. And as I said, he teamed up with Mike Lucci, who's a great drummer, a great producer, and they put together what I think is a really fun track. You know, they took a song and it's just, you listen to it and you know they had fun making it. And they took the song and did something really original with it. So to me, it's one of my favorite on the record.
I tell you, particularly when I watch a band live, and now I try to cue into how they cue each other and stuff. And let me tell you, when I see the joy in people who are playing together, it just transcends everything and really makes it a great experience for the listener. You know,
Sure.
so.
I think when you see a live band and they're having fun, the audience can't help but have fun.
Right. Agreed. All right. So let's listen to I'm a Long Gone Daddy. We'll be right back after the song. Thanks so much for that, Bill. We'll be right back.
I'm gonna do some riding on the midnight train. I'm taking everything except my ball and chain. I'm a leaving now. I'm leaving now. I'm a long gone daddy. I don't need you anyhow. All you wanna do is sit around and pout. Now I've had enough and so I'm getting out. I'm leaving now. I'm leaving now. I'm a long gone daddy. I don't need you anyhow. I've been in the doghouse
everybody. We are back. We just listened to I'm a Long Gone Daddy. I tell you, I got to encourage everybody to listen to the CD, stream this music. It is called, I'll hold it up again, Hank Williams Uncovered. And as I was telling Bill earlier, it made Hank Williams come alive again to me. And then to hear the interpretation by the different artists was really kind of great. So anyway, it's a great project. I look forward to your other projects as we go forward. So I got to ask you this, Bill. Obviously, you've been around. It's like 17 years now, right? That you've been a studio thereabouts.
Yeah, we started in 2000. The record label we started in 2006.
Okay.
So it's 16, 17 years. Yeah.
So is it by word of mouth? I mean, how do you get your business? How do you get artists to approach you? And it's just,
Well, I mean, there's really two sides to what I do. I mean, I have the recording studio, and then I have the record label.
okay.
My real passion is the record label. The recording studio is a means to the record label. So, I mean, I work with artists who have nothing to do with the label all the time. And I just love recording music, and I love producing, and I love somebody coming in and here's my song and let's record it. And I like working with people who say, what do you think? And I was like, well, we need an organ, and here you should break down and do this. And I love doing that. And I love taking really good Long Island music and try and get it out to the rest of the world. And that's the real challenge. That's the really hard part of doing this. You know, I made this CD, the Hank Williams CD, produced several of the songs. A lot of the songs were produced by other people. And that was the easy part. Now
Right.
the challenge is getting people to hear it. And that's always been the challenge. But when they do, when I hear, radio stations say, oh yeah, we played your song, or I mean, I love to relay that music to the artist, and it makes them feel so good. And that's really what it's all about. That's why we do this.
So the mechanics, help me understand the mechanics of a record label in that let's take this Hank Williams project, okay? Is there the potential as a small record company to be picked up by Sony or somebody else to say, we like what you did here, we want to expose it out? Is that a possibility or not really anymore?
Sure, it's a possibility, and I would
Okay.
love that. It hasn't happened yet, but
Well,
there's always that
I'll see what I
possibility.
can do. I'll see what I can do.
All right, yeah, I appreciate it. Certainly, you'd get your percentage. I guarantee that. But the music industry has changed so much. I mean,
Mhm.
back in the day, like you said earlier, a record company would sign an artist, they'd front them money, they'd cover the cost of the recording, they'd cover the cost of, touring, and then, eventually the artist might make some money back. But today it's just so different because everybody can make a record. And what is the role of the record company these days? Uh, that's very hard to define, and it really depends. Somebody like a small label like ourselves, we're just here to help anybody who we think has music to put out there, get it out there in any form that we can. And, I have a studio, so I have the ability to, all right, so you can record it and your recording expenses won't be astronomical, and we'll help you record it, we'll help you put it out there if we like it. And that's what
My-
we can offer.
Yeah, my assumption would be that I'm an artist. I've done some home recordings. They're pretty good. I come to you, you kind of bring the level of the game up a little bit. My assumption would be if a record label at any size recognizes an artist is worthy of further production, that adds to their credibility to get the word out. I would think, unless I'm
Well, it
grasping at
does.
straws here.
It does. And, we've been doing this for, like you said, 16, 17 years, whatever it is now. And we do have a lot of radio stations and a lot of radio shows that if we send them a CD, they're going to listen and they're going to play it. I mean,
Okay.
we've definitely developed some of that,
Credibility.
and it might not be the biggest stations, but it's stations that are playing the kind of music that we put out. That's the other thing. The music that we put out is not pop music. You're not going to hear it on, the big FM stations, but you're going to hear it on the FM stations, the shows maybe on the weekends where the DJs are playing the music they want to play,
Right.
not the music that they're told to play. And that's really where our audience goes.
Yeah, it's interesting, even down to, and I had a discussion about this, about artificial intelligence, particularly through the streaming things. Hey, if you like, when you sign up for a streaming service, oh, what do you like? Oh, I like this guy. Oh, then you're gonna like this guy. And I'm sorry, I'm anti-authoritarian. It's like I don't want a computer telling me what I'm gonna like to hear. Maybe
Right,
I'm wrong.
right. What we do is we put out these compilation CDs like the Hank Williams CD, but our hope is that, for example, a Pete Mancini fan will get the CD, but then they'll listen to the other 21 artists on there and they'll check out their original music,
Right.
and that's what this is all about. We're just trying to help these guys get more attention, find new audiences any way they can. And sometimes it's by playing a cover song that somebody already knows. But if it gets them to listen, then it might be worth it.
It's interesting. It's actually the formula in talking to, I typically don't have tribute bands on, but I've spoken to artists who were in tribute bands and they do their own music too. And
Sure.
they use that as a means to an end. Yeah, I'm getting into the venue. I have an audience. I have a following because they like Aerosmith or whatever, Petty, whomever. And I'll sneak in some of my own original music. You're kind of doing the same thing in a more direct way. Because
Well,
if
listen,
I hear
to make a living in music these days, especially on Long Island, is tough. So you may have to play in a tribute band to pay the bills, but then you still want to make your music on the side, and hopefully somebody hears that too.
Right, exactly. I think the other aspect, and we touched upon it, is the social media, and I'm really intrigued by how people approach it. And there's these two guys, the Como brothers, who I think are fantastic. They sound to me like the Everly brothers, and they must put 2 songs out a month. But then they got to the point where they do these reels of music. They'll come out with their song on a reel. Then they'll come out with their song on a reel with the lyrics. And it's very mathematical how they approach it, to a point where YouTube is paying them $30 a reel because now they're influencers.
Right.
It's freaking wacky, how the approach is. But
That's certainly something I have to get better at is social media. It seems to change, every week there's something new or something different. And
yeah, I
wish I
found
was-
there's like a generational divide, and I'm not hitting myself on the back, but it's changing so much. For example, with the whole thing with Spotify allowing me to put the streams in to tie it back to the artist. Great. I think there is a content war, especially if TikTok's going to go away with all the controversy that's happening there. YouTube just came out and says, we want to promote a podcast on YouTube, video podcast. Cool. And it's like early stages. So that's the latest buzz. Other things have to do with artificial intelligence, and Chat GP is another thing where you can actually state in, hey, I'm talking to a studio executive about creating music. Give me some questions, and boop, it'll spit out some script. Kind of interesting.
it's almost scary, actually.
Oh, I know. I actually
People are gonna stop thinking.
I think people stopped thinking a long time ago.
Oh, that's true too.
We like the unthinkers. Just listen to music. You don't think about it and buy it. Hey, let's talk about, I think Mike or Mick Hargraves, you were talking about this.
Yeah, let's talk about Mick Hargraves. Mick has his own studio out east called the Lantern Sound Rig, is I believe what he calls that.
Okay.
He's a great producer, a great engineer, but he contributed a track to this called Half as Much.
Okay.
And what I love about the track is that he does what we're always looking for when we do these. I don't want to call them tribute CDs because they're not. They're taking these artists and interpreting their music in a different way.
Right.
And he did that exactly with this Hank Williams song. He turned it upside down, and man, it's a great track. It's a wonderful way to interpret a song, and he did it in his studio, and
He made it his own. He made it his own.
He definitely made it his own, and
Right.
but not only that, he made it good too. So you can make it your own, but it might not be good. But he made it his own and made it great. So.
All right. So let's listen to Half as Much. We'll be right back after the song. Stick with
All
us,
right.
everybody.
Thanks.
If you love me half as much as I love you, you wouldn't worry me half as much as you do. You're nice to me when there's no one else around. You only build me up to let me down. If you missed me half as much as I miss you, you wouldn't stay away half as much as you do. I know that I would never feel so blue if you only loved me half as much as I love you. As I love you, you wouldn't worry me half as much as you do. You're nice to me when there's no one else around. You only build me up to let me down. As much as I miss you, you wouldn't stay away half as much as you do. I know that I would never feel so blue if you only loved me half as much as I love you. If you only love me half as much as I love you. If you only love me half as much as I love you.
everybody. We're back with Bill Herman. I'm learning a hell of a lot about the recording industry. He gave me all the secrets to the kingdom of how to be a successful recording artist, but I'm not going to share it with anybody because I'm selfish. So you'll have to tune in another time, another podcast. Hey, so I've spoken about the wellspring of talent, which I am utterly amazed about Long Island and what we have, and particularly the diversity of artists. Tell me about some of the people on this compilation who you've done other recordings with, and let's give kind of a shout out to them.
Sure. Well, we talked about Pete Mancini, so maybe we should. But again, Pete's a phenomenal. Anybody who gets a chance to go out and see him, I suggest you do that. I know he's coming out with some new music in April, so make sure you check that out as well. But some of the other people, well, on this CD, for example, there's Alan Santoriello. Alan has been playing on Long Island. He's in our age group, so he's been playing for 40 years. He started out with the Little Wilson Band,
right?
Who, if you ever go to Northport in the summer, you won't be able to get into Northport Park because they will have filled the place up. Alan has been making a living as a musician for a long time.
Plays with the
One
Walkers.
Of the best. With Mike Nugent, your buddy Mike Nugent and the Walkers. Yes, they're playing tomorrow night, I think.
That's correct. They're playing at some brewery.
Yes, the brewer, some
Cow
Milk Cow Brewery, Cow Harbor Brewery.
Yep, that's it.
Cow cells. Yeah, right. Yeah. So no, Alan's great, and we did. He has an original music CD out that I wish he would promote more because it is one of the best CDs that we've ever made in our studio. So so there's him, Mike Me, and we played his.
Let me stop you right there because I tried to corner Al because he actually sat in at one of our showcases with Mike and David Noyes. And I just got to say this about Al. Al has a personality that exudes joy in what he's doing. He's a great front man, and people were commenting of who's that guy. He has a great joy about, and he's a great singer and a great musician.
He does.
So anyway,
and if you want to have a fun time, go down to the wine cellar in Northport on every other Sunday. He does a thing called Sitting In with Wilson. Usually starts at 4:00. That reminds me of when I went down to New Orleans and people would just come and play. You never know who's going to play each Sunday. And he's the leader of the band, and it's great. So yeah, Alan, we're hoping to get some more original music out of Alan.
All right, well, Alan, you're gonna be listening to this podcast, and we're calling you out. So
yeah, there you go.
So there you go.
A couple other people on here are Chris James and Annie Mark.
Okay.
Annie Mark is a great singer-songwriter. Chris James is just a great all-around musician. He plays with the Haymakers, and the Haymakers were almost like the house band on this record. They did their own track. They backed Donna Domingo. Chris did a track by himself, but it was really with the Haymakers and some people from his older band. Chris is another great musician, but some other people that have been on Paradiddle that I'd like to talk about. One is Russ Seeger.
Okay.
And Russ is one of the most talented musicians I've had the opportunity to work with. I've done two original CDs with him here. He played along with Mike Me in a band called The Last Hombres.
Okay.
Levon Helm was their drummer on one of their CDs. So right away they got some serious street cred. Sure. But Russ would come into the studio. He'd have an idea in his head. I want the song to sound like this. And he'd explain it to me. I wouldn't understand. But by the end, it would be like, oh, my God, this is a brilliant song. So I've been really blessed to have some really talented musicians in here. You had Bill Scorzeri on your show.
Oh, yeah. Bill was great.
So my Bill Scorzeri story is one day I got a call from some guy. He said, I'm looking for a studio. I want to record a song. He was doing it. He had an original song. I think it was called Blue Water. and maybe it was for the veterans who were building houses. So he came in to record that. And we recorded the basic tracks, and then he'd come in to follow up on it. He goes, I got some other songs I want to record. And we literally recorded 70 songs as a demo. He had just had an epiphany as a songwriter. He had listened to Townes Van Zandt, and instead of wanting to play Led Zeppelin, he wanted to be a singer-songwriter. Did these 70 songs. We did his first record here, and he has since gone on to bigger and better things, recording in Nashville, and the whole Bill Scorsese story. But
Well, I got to tell you, my connection to Bill is a left field connection. So I'm in this electronic security business as my day job. I go to Bill's house because I get a lead in Huntington. He lives in Huntington. And I get a lead to this house, and I meet Bill. I have no idea who he is, right? By the way, I didn't get the job, but that's neither here nor there. We go down into his basement, and you get like the door. You open it up, and it's like the ultimate man cave recording studio in his house. And I'm looking around. I'm like, my jaws dropping, right? This is like 4 or 5 years ago. Okay. And as I'm thinking about customers, I'm like, hey, I remember this guy. I know he's probably recorded something. I called him up, and sure enough, he said, yeah, I'll be on your podcast. And it blew me away.
Oh.
And he was coming out with his album that had to do about Kansas, The Winds of Kansas or something like that.
Right.
And he's got
his home studio is amazing. His basement is 2 stories high. I mean, it's an amazing thing. And
he's got such a unique voice.
Yep.
You have to, I'm going to leave it at that. You have to listen to him, and certain artists came to mind when his approach to it. It's so unique and refreshing.
Well, also what was funny was when I met him, he was this clean-cut guy with short hair. He might have still been a practicing attorney.
Right.
And then within a year, he has this beard. Now I call him, the man, the myth, the legend, the beard, because it's, and he
looks like one of the Smith brother cough drop guys.
Yeah, exactly. But he's devoted himself to his music, and he's put everything into it. So it's great to see the success he's been having.
That's nice. Nice.
Nice. The other people I have in the studio sometimes are some of the people from Nirma. I don't know, you're familiar with Nirma at all?
Oh yeah, sure. In fact, my experience with Nirma was I saw the Neil Young show.
Mm-hmm.
It was at an American Legion, I think, in Hewlett Harbor, right?
No, Huntington Harbor.
Excuse me. And that blew my mind. Yeah, and I've seen a couple of shows since. I got to connect with those people because
you should. You should speak to.
It's very similar to what you're doing in the compilation they do on stage.
They do.
Through an album. Yeah.
Yeah, they do a great job. That's Tom Ryan and Steve Prisco. Those are people you should have on your show. You should talk to them because they put on these incredible shows. There's a whole body of musicians they get involved in these things, and they put on these wonderful performances. And I've been lucky enough to work with some of them in the studio and from time to time. So,
yeah, what I liked about their performance is it ran very smoothly in that sometimes when you have a lot of artists coming up on stage, you get kind of clunky, okay, I'm going to plug in, you're gone. They went like that. Boom, boom, boom through.
They know what they're doing. They have a good team.
Yeah. There's another group of guys, a guy named Bill Donnelly and Dan Donnelly. They do something similar. They do a thing called Albums We Love. Mm-hmm. And they pick an album, that started with the Peter Gabriel album. They did the Deja Vu album. And then they'll play, a few places out on South Shore, and it's great. It's just real. And they do a knockout job. So I enjoy stuff.
Well, I think this speaks to what you were saying before, is how much talent there is on Long Island. There's so many great musicians, and it's fun to listen to them and work with them, and sometimes get to play with them. It's wonderful.
Yeah, what's interesting too is coming out of quarantine, we're all kind of locked up, and just as normal practice, not on a big audio file or anything, is hey, when I go out with my wife, it's like, oh, where's the live music playing? let's go where there's live music, because that's going to be entertaining for us. And I think now with the backlog, I think there's a lot of stuff going on and a lot to discover out there. And that's where, as I get older, and I've spoken about this on other podcasts, where, you know what, I didn't want to get in the rut of reminiscing about the bands I loved from the 70s, and I love them, but I don't want to just be hearing that same thing. I want to hear interpretations of that. I want to hear new music. And, you know, it's just like the Pete Mancini fan club, but guys like Pete who can take old music and make it young again, you know, and give his interpretation and follow in that same vein. That I think is exciting, you know. And Gene Casey, another guy, had no idea about Gene. Go to see him live, and I'm like, this guy just lifts the whole place up. It was just, he knows one, and I have categories, and I'm yapping too much here again, but I look at people who are very good at their craft and what they do, and then there's a line that crosses says, not only do they do that, but they engage the audience, and they're a real entertainer, and they can do that back and flow. That is a special skill. It doesn't happen to everybody who's good at woodshedding their voice and their instruments. So it just.
But you're right. Gene is a performer and an entertainer, and yeah, he just puts on a great show. But I think what you said is interesting, because there's a lot of people who grow up and they spend their whole lives listening to everything they listened to in high school. And there's nothing wrong with that, and if that makes them happy, and that's great. But there's other people, and I guess you and I fall into that category, that are always looking for something new, something different. And there's so much of that to be found. And you can find it on Long Island. You can find it in the clubs where they play the original music. And we're very lucky for that.
Yeah. And you know, guys at our age, was interesting. We went, when I was in high school, there were a lot of bands that played, you know, all over, okay, in all the bars. And then disco came, and everything changed, and it was disappointing. And that's when I got married, because disco was there. But no, it changed, you know.
That's how you responded to disco. You went and got married.
Yeah, and I'm paying for it ever since. No, no, I'm kidding. Honey, I'm kidding. This is a test for my wife if she actually listens to the podcast, because then I'll hear it later.
That's right.
She doesn't listen to the podcast, but I'm seeing that resurgence of live music, which I think is great. You know, there's something about communal, and to be honest with you, I'll go to a Jones Beach concert and stuff like that. I like the smaller venues, maybe because they're more intimate. I mean, I don't buy the $300 or $400 tickets at Jones Beach, and then you end up in the nosebleed section, and you're watching it on the screen anyway. There is that communal experience of it, but I do like 75, 125, 150 people, intimate things, because you're right there. You know, the Paramount has that capability.
The Paramount, there's also, you know, the Landmark in Port Washington is great. I don't know if you see shows there, but I love seeing shows there, because it's like an old high school auditorium, and they get really good bands there.
Yeah. I think Steve Forbert played there recently.
Steve Forbert. We're going to be seeing Willie Nile Saturday. The Jayhawks are playing. You know.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
This I love the Jayhawks.
Oh, me too. They're probably my favorite band, and you know, but they've played there a couple times, and that's a great place. That's a real find on Long Island. So there's some venues that are small, intimate, and have good music.
If you like the Jayhawks, and I'm going to throw another pitch in for a bluegrass group out of Brooklyn, of all places, called Damn Tall Buildings. And if you like and I remember, because this reminded me, they love the Jayhawks too. And if you like the Jayhawks, you got to check out their stuff. Damn Tall Buildings.
I'll be listening to them on tomorrow morning, I assure you.
All right, cool. Hey, so let's because we talk about Gene so much, I feel like I owe Gene just for the love and entertainment he brought to us. Tell me about Gene's song "You Win Again," how that came about, and let's have the audience listen to it.
Oh, well, I reached out to Gene and said I was doing a Hank Williams project. He said, "Of course I'm in. What song do you want to do?" He came up with this one. Now, he brought in his band for this one. I think the last one we did he did most of the recording himself. I think on the Willie Nile record we did, but this one he wanted to have the Lone Sharks be part of it.
Okay.
And they came in, they recorded it here in this studio, and I don't know, every time they play, it's great. So, it's, I mean, what can I say? He picked a perfect song for his band, and they did a great job.
All right. Without further ado, let's listen to You Win Again with Gene Casey and the Lone Sharks. We'll be right back after the song.
The news is out. It's all over town that you've been seen out there running around. I know that I should leave, but then I just can't go. You win again. This heart of mine could never see what everybody knew but me. Just trusting in you was my great sin. What can I do? You win again. This heart of mine could never see what everybody knew but me. Just trusting in you. That was my great sin. But what can I do? You win again. What can I do? You win again.
Bill, one thing that I was fascinated about on this compilation CD of which is called Hank Williams Uncovered is how many artists you had on the CD. And the other thing is, I'm like, oh crap, I got to put my glasses on because I'm trying to read the creds. So maybe you could tell us about some of the artists or all the artists on the album.
Sure. Well, we've talked about a couple of them some at length, like Pete and Gene Casey. But there are a lot of great people on the CD. I mean, after Gene Casey, the next person I reached out to was Caroline Doctorow.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. She's a singer-songwriter, lives out on the East End in Sag Harbor. She's actually the daughter of E.L. Doctorow, the great American author.
Oh, interesting.
She's a great songwriter, but she's also a wonderful interpreter of songs. And she's been part of the Paradiddle family, been on a lot of our CDs, and she contributed Cold, Cold Heart, and she did a great job on that. Grayson Yu did some background vocals on that track, so that was really nice.
Mm,
I know we touched on Mary Lamont, the queen of Long Island country, but she and her husband Jim, again, they did a great track. You're gonna change or I'm gonna leave.
right, right. I remember listening
Couldn't
to
couldn't
that.
do a couldn't do Hank Williams. Couldn't do country without including her.
Right, sure. Yeah, she was a great guest on the podcast.
Yeah, I learned some really interesting things about her. I didn't know that. She worked with Alice Cooper. I mean,
That was the
talk about a clash of worlds. That
I'm,
was really
I'm
surprising.
telling you, that came out when I was interviewing her, and this happens a lot in interviews, so out of left field. I'm like, nah, come on, really? And
Yeah,
it was a great story.
it was great. You learn some interesting things.
Yeah, sure.
I know we mentioned Alan Santoriello, who played with Mike Nugent, but
Hmm.
also, and I think I mentioned that he's well, his brother is also on this,
Oh, okay.
and they're both in the Little Wilson band.
Right.
So his brother contributed a really cool track, setting the woods on fire. So that was fun. So I got both of the Santoriello brothers on here.
Nice.
Donna Domingo, I think I mentioned her briefly because I mentioned that the Haymakers backed up several people on it. Donna plays in a Johnny Cash tribute band. She's
Hmm.
June Carter. I believe she also does a Patsy Cline thing, which
Hmm.
is something I've considered as a follow up. I don't know if I'll go through with that, but
Right,
that
right.
seems to go hand in hand with Hank Williams.
Sure.
And let's see, Annie Mark was on it, who is Chris James's wife. They also did a track together. So Chris James and Annie are on this CD a couple different places.
Hmm.
Jerry McKevney, staple in the Long Island music scene. He did Move It On Over. He plays with Gathering Time.
Okay.
So they're a pretty well known folk trio.
Uh-huh.
Let's see who else. Oh, Roger Street Friedman. I can't forget him. He's another really good songwriter. What's interesting about his track, besides the fact that it's really good, is that Larry Campbell produced it. He also
Oh,
played fiddle, pedal steel, mandolin, guitar. So there's some real good talent on that track.
sure, sure.
Um, the Hoodoo Loungers. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
No, they're new to me.
Okay, they're again an East End Long Island band. They really a New Orleans influenced band. A lot of
Hmm.
fun. If you get a chance to see them live, go see them because it's just a party when they play. Um,
Nice, nice. One of
we
my
put out
favorite
their
cities.
Oh yeah, me too. I've been there several times and I love it. But we put out their last CD, So Beautiful, and they contributed a track to this. My bucket's got a hole in it, so that was
Oh,
that
right,
was
right.
nice.
Nice, nice.
Um, there's also a group, the Lone Pine Radio Boys.
Okay.
Now, this is there was a band back in the late 70s called the Werewolves out of Texas. And their first album was produced by Andrew Logue Oldham, the Rolling Stones manager. And then they
Okay.
kind of faded away. But I got to know Frank from that band, Frank Sampedro, and he has this side project, the Lone Pine Radio Boys, and they did a track. So again, it's fun to do that, and hopefully we'll be hearing. I think the Werewolves are actually going to put out some new music after what is that, 30 years? So that'll be
Wow,
fun.
interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Then there's Hank Stone, Wearing Out Your Walking Shoes. Hank, another staple on the Long Island scene. We're actually working on a new CD of original music with him, so that should be something that's coming out soon.
Nice, nice.
Um, and I really would be remiss. Now, you showed the CD, all right? This is the
Yep.
CD. This cover is an original drawing. It's done by Ken Korb. He
Really?
is he's a fantastic artist, but he's also known as Ken the Rocket Korb, who
Okay.
is one of the top harmonica players on Long Island. He's an amazing musician, an even more amazing artist. And he and his wife Laura did a track on here on Blue on Lonesome.
Mm-hmm.
And also his son Michael did the mastering of the CD, and he's on the Weeping Willows, and he's singing the lead vocal on that track as well as playing guitar.
Nice, nice.
So there's been a lot of. I hope I didn't leave anybody out. I'm trying to think. I don't think I did. I know again we talked about some of the other people earlier, Mick and Mike Meehan. So, and if I did leave anybody out, I apologize to them. But I think we covered just about everybody because,
Well, you know what's so interesting to me is just maybe you've been around for a while, but the fact that you're able to gather all those people and have such such diversity, and kind of like the Haymakers is the house band on the CD on a lot of tracks. I think you had mentioned once
right.
before. So you really, you weren't starving to try and find somebody to do a particular Hank Williams tune, and I'm sure that was probably part of your process of how do you divvy things up, or did a lot of the artists come and say, "Hey, I like to do this, I'd like to do that," or was it more of your direction as far as song selection?
With this, it was a lot of people said, "Oh, I want to do this song," and a lot of times they pick the less obvious songs.
Hmm. Okay.
You know who I didn't mention, who I really should mention, is Claudia Jacobs. I don't know. You're familiar with Claudia?
Now, see, I'm such a neophyte in here. Even though I'm 61, I'm kind of young as far as getting to know the who's who. I mean, you're going to be my go-to guy, so whether you know it or
Okay.
not.
Well, Claudia was on our Kinks Uncovered CD, a
Hmm.
great singer-songwriter. She plays Long Island very frequently, and she was one of the last tracks we added to the CD. And I'm trying to figure, there's so many. I'm trying to remember which one she did, but it was one of his more popular songs. And oh yeah, Why Don't You Love Me? Why Don't You Love Me Like
Oh
You
yeah.
Used to Do? One of his
Hmm.
best known songs, and that was one of the last ones that we did because so many people picked songs that were um,
Obscure.
lesser known, like
Right.
Wearing Out My Walking Shoes, Setting the Woods on Fire, I'm Blue, I'm Lonesome, songs that people don't know, but were great Hank Williams songs.
Right. Right. Well, I tell you, it sounds one amazed about many things. The amount of artists, the fact that you said you put it together in about 14 or 15 months, which is amazing to me. But I said it earlier, and it really kind of hung with me as I listened to this album in the car, the CD in the car. Is it brought Hank Williams alive to me, and sure enough, it was like, oh, I knew this was covered by X celebrity artist, and then you find out, yeah, it's really a Hank Williams tune, and
Right, yeah,
you got to go back to your roots. So, everything old is new again, as they say. So you helped resurrect Hank Williams
sure.
for our audience, and it has the Long Island Sound endorsement, if that means anything to our
Well, it
listeners.
certainly does. That's a great endorsement to have. So,
So, hey, Bill, let's take a quick break. Thanks for really bringing all the artists to life who put their blood, sweat, and tears and emotions and their nuances to the song, which makes everything beautiful. So let's take a break. We'll be right after the break, everybody. Hang with
sounds
us.
good. Thanks.
At the Long Island Sound, we're much more than a podcast. We're building a community. Please go to gigdestiny.com, check out all our social media links, subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast. Please comment, call the listener line, tell us what you think, what questions we should ask, who we should have on the show. And most of all, we thank you for your generous support. And remember, support the artists who are guests on the show. Now back to the podcast.
I tell you, that recording with Gene Casey is great, but I'm going to sing the gospel of seeing these artists live. And if you have anything to put on your bucket list and you're in the New York area, see Gene Casey and the Lone Sharks, mostly on the east end of Long Island, although he's coming to close to Nassau to some degree. A great show and a big-hearted guy, like you said earlier, Bill. But yeah, it is. This is a CD that's going to be in my car for many weeks to come, because there's now that I'm kind of cued into who's singing and a little bit of the background. I hope the audience is in the same light as me. I want to learn more about Pete Mancini and about, Mary Lamont was a guest on my show, and she was perfect for the song that she did. I want to know more about the artists that you've had at Paradiddle. So thanks for bringing that to the table today.
My pleasure.
All right.
I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I look forward to more conversations, Bill. And as we take a deeper dive, we're both on the same mission to expose the wellspring of talent here on Long Island. So nice to have a partner in crime as we move or we paddle in the same direction together, and to help these artists out, because they're the ones who, I've always said this, these artists are the ones who are able to speak and say things in their music that I can't always articulate. And that's where it kind of touches my heart and it helps me remember and move forward and look at life with blessings and graciousness. So, and with that, I thank you, Bill, for spending your time with me. I really appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on. It's been fun.
Great. All right, everybody, till next time. We'll see you. Check out the album Hank Williams Uncovered, and you're going to love it. All right, guys. Take care, Bill.
All right, thanks.
Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate the time you spent with us. Please subscribe and comment and visit us at gigdestiny.com. Till next time, be generous with your joy, keep your spirits high, and let the music take you on a journey. Be well. Peace.